Well, hello everybody. I have plugged in a microphone and I just want to make sure that everything sounds okay. That there isn't some annoying clicking sound in the background, because when I use this microphone with my iPhone, it's an older SE. I mean, I've had it for a few years and I can't use it without this annoying clicking sound. So I'm hoping that it's okay, that the sound is fine. I might actually see what I sound like if I play myself back. Let's see. Let's see if I can hear myself. Let's see. Oh no, I would have to unplug my microphone. Let me try unplugging it and see what happens. Okay, it seems like it's going. It seems like everything is okay. So I'm going to begin. Hello, I see that there are two people viewing. Maybe one of them is myself. I'm not sure. Yeah, so I'm a little bit behind on reading The Three Musketeers. I have read like the first 7 chapters, so I'm quite behind. There have been a few live things. Hello, Felide. Let me know if the sound is weird, if you hear something. There might be some thumping because somebody upstairs is doing something. But otherwise, like, I'm using a microphone for the first time, and it's a microphone that doesn't work on my iPhone because I get this horrible clicking noise, but I think it should be fine now. I've checked it, but let me know if you hear anything. Okay, so as I was saying, I'm a little bit behind, but I have really been enjoying what I've been reading. It is very fast-paced. I think Dumas is, he really writes a good story. And I find the characters to be interesting. I sometimes, at the moment, sometimes it's hard for me to distinguish between Athos, Porthos, and Aramis. Sometimes I mix them up, but then I remember I associate them with how they were when I was first introduced to them. Okay, great. Thank you, Felide. So Athos, I associate with the injured musketeer at the very beginning. Porthos is like, somehow I've always remembered Porthos, even from when I read it at the age of 12, as just like the alcoholic. It's not entirely true, but Porthos is supposed to be kind of like the foolish musketeer, or at least he's perceived as foolish by the others. And Aramis wants to be a priest, but it seems like there's some baggage that he needs to sort out before he can become a priest. In the meantime, he is a musketeer. And then D'Artagnan, who is a spectacular character. He's a Gascon, so a lot of emphasis is on his accent, and his accent is, there's this history of ridiculing regional accents in France, and also associating certain regions with certain characteristics. And I think that's definitely exemplified in the character of D'Artagnan. Lots of his friends talk about how they like hearing him speak because he speaks with this Gascon accent. So where am I in the story? I am currently in the midst of the intrigue, so I'm not entirely sure what is going on. But I see that, gosh, I keep forgetting their names. I'm very, very bad with names. Let me pull up the character list. Yeah, so there's Madame de Bonacieux, who claims to be the servant, the handmaid for Queen Anne of France. And she is in love with the Duke of Buckingham, and her husband is taken away to the Bastille. So, like, that's where I am, and D'Artagnan has gotten involved, and D'Artagnan has now fallen in love with Bonacieux's husband, or wife. Actually, he's not in love with his husband, his wife. And so, you know, he suspects that Aramis is having an affair with Madame de Bonacieux, and then he feels really, really jealous. So on the one hand, he wants to help her, but on the other hand, he's like really jealous and wants her for himself rather than saving her husband. So yeah, I'm kind of, like I said, I haven't gone as far as I would have liked. But I read recently this fantasy novel. See if I can find it. It's called Les Lames du Cardinal. That's what it's called. It's called Les Lames du Cardinal. It is by Pierre Pavel, and it's a historic fantasy that basically takes the characters in the Three Musketeers and adds dragons. And so Cardinal de Richelieu has a dragon. And I liked the book, but I didn't realize how, he's definitely taking the characters like from history partially, but also Dumas' version of history. And I think that this one is better. But I was reading a retelling of it recently with dragons, and I was rereading now the Three Musketeers. I could see which characters were taken by Pierre Pavel, how he adapts them. So it helps me appreciate later retellings. But yeah, so basically there are two groups of guards. There are the guards for the king, which are the Musketeers. And then you have the guards of the cardinal, Arnaud Duplessis, also known as Richelieu. And Monsieur de Tréville is the head of the guards of the Musketeers. And he is very close to the king, and he also tries to get the king to favor the Musketeers, even though the Musketeers are often picking fights with the Cardinal's guards. Not that the Cardinal's guards are innocent, they're also picking fights with the Musketeers, but he tries to manipulate the situation to win the king's favor, and ultimately to try to convince the king that D'Artagnan belongs in the Musketeers. And unfortunately, at this time, D'Artagnan, he is still very green, and so he is having to enter into the company of Monsieur Desessert. But even though he's supposed to be brand new, and even though he's supposed to be really young, D'Artagnan is like this phenomenal musketeer, right? He's basically one of the best. And so he is treated in a way by Monsieur de Tréville as one of the musketeers, despite not being technically one yet. He has to prove himself. And that's essentially like the landscape of this story. This is a really big book. It is over 500 pages. But I think that October is a great time to read The Three Musketeers, just because I feel like a cloak and dagger story fits with with autumn, and also it has this dark side to it. So I think it's perfect. D'Artagnan has a servant from Picardy, so he's Picard, named Planchet. And he is very loyal to D'Artagnan, and yet he's also someone who's aware of what's going on. He's always somehow there, listening in. I have, there is definitely a lot of description in this book, but it's not overbearing. I feel like Dumas does a good job in limiting excessive description that serves no purpose. Oftentimes, the description actually helps, at least me, understand who the characters are better. And I just love the banter between the characters. Like there's one part when the three Musketeers, well, I guess now 3 plus D'Artagnan, they're like, "Oh, we will die for you." They tell the king, and the king is like, "No, we want you alive right now." There's all these great rebuttals that I have underlined in my version. The same thing happens in the south of the U.S. With respect to, are we talking about accents? I think maybe we're talking about accents here, because yeah, it's true that in the United States there is like the Midwestern broadcast, like news anchors have this particular dialect ultimately of English that is used, and then the regions are outside of that. I think if you're talking about accents, but yes, yeah, similar thing in France. There are actually many regional languages in France. So while French is definitely the dominant language, and while some regional languages are near extinction, there are people who do speak the regional languages, and there are several. And they're not. I mean, they're not like in the South. There is Spanish, of course, spoken, but like the English is still English. But they're actually different languages that are spoken in France. And of course, at this time, this is before. Well, actually, no. This is the time when the Académie Française is established by Cardinal Richelieu himself. And the Académie Française, the French Academy, is responsible for having standardized the French language and create this idea of like proper French and how proper French is supposed to be spoken. This is, of course, something that helps the monarchy. So you were ahead of me also. Wow. Okay. That I'm not. I'm so behind. I just thought that this could be a good time to talk about the characters that we've been introduced to. I love the idea. There is a theme that I realize that I love in fiction, and that's the rags to riches, or I wouldn't say rags to riches, but someone who comes from poverty and then wants to prove themselves and is able to get out of that by proving themselves. So we have D'Artagnan, and then we have Monsieur de Tréville, who is attracted to D'Artagnan, wants D'Artagnan to be a musketeer, partially because his story is so similar to his own. So, yeah. I don't really have a whole lot to say. I can like go through and see if there are things that jumped out at me. Jump in if you have any comments or anything. There's this line where D'Artagnan compares Athos to Achilles, Porthos to Ajax, and Aramis to Joseph. And I think that's an interesting comparison. Definitely, D'Artagnan has a very glorified, idealistic idea of his friends. And I think we see how those elements are undermined in these characters at the same time. I mean, I think of Aramis being compared to Joseph. Yeah, Aramis wants to be a priest, but Aramis seems to have some secrets that involve women. And, you know, we do know that in the meantime, he's a musketeer. So he's putting off this priest business until he gets some other stuff done. And Porthos, I suspect, aren't they called the Immortals? Yes, that is how they compare. Yes, that is what they're called. My brain kept reminding. Okay, so I see. My brain kept reminding me, oh, this is going to happen next, and then it did. This bugs me. I like to be surprised. I didn't realize I would remember this so much. Oh, you like to be surprised. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. It's not that I found this book. There are elements of it that I still remember, but I think there are also just so much intrigue that I've forgotten that I'm constantly paying attention again to the details. Very much like my experience reading Beauty and the Beast, the French version, last at the beginning of October, or was it? No, it was the end of September. I was just constantly paying attention to the details, and right now I'm like in the midst of the intrigue, so I'm trying to understand what's going on. They are called the Immortals. I have that written somewhere. Let's see. Oh, I don't know if I have it down here. Yeah, I do remember he's called that. Oh, there's a comeback here that I have. He says, so okay, this is between, so this is where, with the incident of the mouchoir, which is what napkin. It's a napkin that Aramis has, and he had dropped it, and so D'Artagnan picks it up, and then of course Aramis sees this as an affront, and Aramis is hiding something, and so, you know, he basically says that he wants to kill D'Artagnan. And D'Artagnan responds, he goes, so Aramis says, I want to kill you. And he's like, once you're dead and you're buried, then you won't be able to boast about your death to anyone. And D'Artagnan is like, no, don't worry about it. I will fight you. Just make sure to take your napkin with you because you will need it. And I was like, oh, that's nice. I was reading a biography of Madame du Barry and had to stop to do the Three Musketeers. Don't worry about it. I've been dealing with some personal stuff. So I have been. There's been a lot going on. Not anything very serious. I mean, it is serious, but not serious in a bad way. But I didn't like expect that, and now I'm like, okay. So I want to make sure that I'm keeping with it. It is a very fast read, though. What else do we have? I don't think we have. I have not met Richelieu yet. So, well, no, we have kind of met Richelieu because he was like playing with the king, like he was playing cards with the king. But we haven't really met him yet. Oh, I should not touch my microphone. That's probably going to cause problems. So yeah, I think that with D'Artagnan, he's like, his kryptonite seems to be women. Because I think that that's going to get him in trouble. I don't remember if it does, but it seems like he has a plan. He's going to defend someone, and then his emotions get in the way. I think that there might be something going on there. I don't know the political history, behind the story very well. So I'm learning it as I'm reading it. I'm back. High jump guru. Okay, great. I don't really know what else to talk about, to be honest. What else have you been reading? Have you been reading other things? I've been reading things for school, but I haven't been reading all the books that I have on my shelves here. And I need to read them and then donate them because I have too many. And I move all too often, so I can never. I should not be acquiring physical books because it's a pain to move. Let's see. The King, Louis XIII. He seems to me to be very, as a character, he seems to me to not. He doesn't seem to me to be very powerful. I think this is part of what makes this interesting is that Richelieu seems to have a lot of power, and Louis XIII claims to have a lot of power, and people, say that they're defending him. But he's so easily manipulated that, he doesn't seem to be a very powerful king. Of course, he's not Louis XIV, which, Louis XIV got rid of any kind of Premier Ministre. He wasn't going to have someone like Cardinal Richelieu stealing the spotlight, having all this political control. Louis XIV, he was an absolute monarch. So at this time, Louis XIII, he is in the shadows of his father, Henry IV, and he's trying to assert himself. But I think as long as he has Richelieu, he's never going to be the only person in power. And the way that Dumas presents it, there are three people in power. The three most powerful people in the kingdom are, of course, the king, Richelieu, and Monsieur de Tréville. He's presented as very powerful himself. Do you think I should do some background reading on Richelieu? I don't think so. I think that what's interesting about historical fiction is the fiction itself. And Dumas is going to present Richelieu in a certain way. It would be interesting, though, to compare Dumas' Richelieu to, a historian's take on a Richelieu. But I don't think it's necessary to have that background. He should give the background himself. Especially because Dumas is not living in the 17th century. He's living 2 centuries later. So this is, he is writing historical fiction, and the history itself is distant from, what his contemporaries would know. Like it's something that they wouldn't be as familiar with, I would imagine. What I end up doing, this is what happens. I'll be reading something, and then I will come across these names, and I'll be a little bit confused, and then I will go on Wikipedia and figure out who this person is. Though I can't do that all the time because I feel like so much of the story is the mystery itself. So, how much should I know about the Duke of Buckingham, for example? Georges Villiers. Except that Georges Villiers is having an affair with Queen Anne of France. And that's all I know at the moment. I think that's what I would recommend with historical fiction. He has definitely tried to paint the atmosphere. So, for example, there's a scene when the three Musketeers plus D'Artagnan are fighting the guards at this hotel. And the hotel is owned by Monsieur de la Trémoille. And Trémoille is an Huguenot, and the king makes a comment about that, like, oh, when he's speaking to Monsieur de Tréville, he says, your musketeers were fighting the guards of all places at this hotel and even threatened to lay siege to it. And he says, which even though Trémoille deserves it because he's an Huguenot, is still causing problems. And that's a little aside about the religious conflicts of this period, which Richelieu was very much involved in. He was very opposed to the Huguenots. But at the same time, Louis XIII is the son of Henry IV, who, although he converted to Catholicism because, quote, Paris is worth a mass, so he converts to Catholicism for political reasons, he does pass the Edict of Nantes, which, really helps the Huguenot out. So he's always sympathetic towards the Huguenot, even after his conversion. So there is, but these religious conflicts continue, and of course you have the wars of religion into the 17th century with the 30 Years' War. And but then the Edict of Nantes is later revoked by Louis XIV, again because he wants to have absolute power, and if you have religious pluralism in a kingdom, that's going to undermine the sovereignty of the king, especially a king who sees himself as the head of the church in France. But what I like is how Dumas doesn't just dump all this information at you. It's kind of touched on in more subtle ways through the dialogue. The whole business with the napkin really lost me. Why was he so upset? I think that the suggestion is that Aramis, though he wants to be a priest, has some secrets involving women. And the napkin, I think the way that Aramis reacts suggests to the reader, as well as I think to D'Artagnan, that he has a secret that he wants to hide, that he has a mistress. And so when D'Artagnan picks up the napkin, Aramis sees this, needs to protect his ego. He needs to protect his image. And so, he sees that as an affront, and he wants to fight D'Artagnan before anything, comes out, or he doesn't want D'Artagnan to come into any conclusions. So, I think that's what it is. I'm also reading Jane the Queen. Is that Jane the Queen? Is that who's it by? Janet Wortman. Is that the one? I realize that I'm really bad in monarchy, and I really should not be bad in monarchy, because I work on the early modern period. But I guess it's about Lady Jane Grey. Oh, one of the wives of Henry VIII. I really don't know Henry VIII. I mean, I know he had several wives, some of whom he executed. One outlived him. That is what I know. Even though I like history, I'm not very good. Handkerchief, not napkin. Okay, thank you. In French, it's mouchoir. And I was like, what is the word? What is the word in English? Handkerchief. That's right. Because napkin is yeah. I knew that. I've been reading it in French, so I'm trying to translate it in my head. That is the right word. Let's. So Alexandre Dumas published this book, I think, alongside a ghostwriter, in a series serialized, and his son was also a writer, of course. So, there's this one thing I need to mention. So the way that the Three Musketeers is set up in the preface, the author tells us that he found this manuscript with all this history that has this manuscript that has never seen it's never been published before. And so the Three Musketeers is not historical fiction. It is rather an actual historic document that he's publishing. And so, that is the frame narrative. This is actually a historic document. And of course, that is a very common strategy that historical fiction authors will use. But I thought this was interesting. I was like, well, if this is a historic document, this is a very exciting historic document that is being published. Yeah, the word is handkerchief. That would be the English word. Napkin is something different. Though, actually, let me see. Yeah, so napkin in French is serviette, but I just forgot the English word. That is all. It is a handkerchief. It is something that's fancy, embroidered, probably has initials on it, clearly comes from a woman, and seems to me to be an important element in the story. The Duke of Buckingham is supposed to be gorgeous. Duke of Buckingham. I suppose. Yeah, I mean, he's got a goatee and a mustache, and okay. I think that he does seem to be a very attractive person. I can see that being a problem for D'Artagnan. Yes. I can also see why, the Queen would prefer this guy over Louis XIII, maybe. Also, everybody had lovers and mistresses. Also, it's France. So, there's that. This is all I have today. And yeah. So, I don't know if you have anything else to say, any other comments. I lip wipe versus napkin. Okay. That's fair. But yes, so the final live stream, I mean, we can do another live stream next Sunday if you'd like. I don't know if that's something that you would like. But the final live stream is on November 1st. And so that's the one where I will be talking about the entire book. And of course, I will have caught up by then. But we can do one next week if you are interested. I don't know how many weeks are left after that. There'll be the 18th and there's the 25th. So, if you want to talk about the first 40 chapters, because I definitely have not read the first 40 chapters, we can meet again on the 18th. And, but let me know what's interesting to you, what works. I realized that I put the first live stream maybe a little bit too early. So, I don't know. Let me know. Should I do one next week? And then one on November 1st? Because then I would probably get the first 40 chapters in by next week for sure. I think I'll do that. I'm going to do that because I know that some of you just got the book. And we can meet again next Sunday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. Anyway, thank you everybody for joining. This was fun. And I will then talk to you next Sunday. So yeah, thank you everybody. Bye.